Whoop whoop, what's up my wizards? It's Dev Mtg. We're liking a magic, especially today, because we got some brand new cards to show you. From War to Spark, that's right. We previewed like 18 cards so far today, and there's probably going to be even more, but I wanted to go ahead and get you what we got you today at the PAX panel. So I got a bunch of stuff to go through. Let's go ahead and get on right to it. I'm pretty excited, in case you can't tell. I actually didn't sleep last night. Because I couldn't, you know? Like, who can sleep on Christmas Eve? And the day before spoiler season always feels like, you know, a holiday evening to me. So, I'm pretty jacked, and I'm actually not that much worse for wear. I don't know if you can tell, I'm not that tired, even though I kind of probably look a little haggard. I'm feeling great, because I got some good stuff to talk about, so let's go. Alright, first up, we got Ignite the Bacon. I know it's Beacon, I'm just trying to get a meme started here. But anyway, it's 5 mana, 4 and a white for an instant. That's pretty amazing. Search your library for up to 2 Planeswalker cards, reveal them, put them in your hand, and shuffle your library. You know, earlier it hit me. I was driving home from the gas station, which is like literally a block up from my apartment, but it hit me on the drive back that like, I bet the first card they spoil today is going to be a Planeswalker tutor. And wouldn't you know, I was expecting like a 2 or 3 mana tutor 1 Planeswalker at sorcery speed, you know? But instead, we got 5 mana at instant speed, super splashable, just 1 colored mana in this casting cost, to go get 2 Planeswalkers, which is freaking nuts. In Commander, I should go ahead and point that out. Any tutors are going to be decent in Commander, even high-cost ones like this, given the instant speed. And that is what might make it really playable in Standard, too. If this was just a sorcery, I'd be like, oh, 5, man, jeez. But since it's instant speed, the whole world opens up, you know? A control deck could very easily play a 1 of this in the main deck, or even the sideboard for games 2 and 3, depending on how important your Planeswalkers are going to be in those matchups. So I could see a control list slipping one of those in there, you know? Because why not just play it at the end of your opponent's turn, in which case you just paid like 1 more mana for a Chemister's Insight that gets you 2 of the most powerful cards in your deck. Or a Teferi and a backup Teferi, you can do that. So I think this is actually pretty good, and you'll probably hear me say this over and over today. Super Friends, right? That's what gonna get a bunch of comments if I don't say it. So if you're new to Magic, Super Friends is just a deck with a bunch of Planeswalkers. So with War of the Spark coming out and it's 37 Planeswalkers, it turns out there's an extra one. We'll talk about it. There's probably gonna be some Super Friends decks. This card's probably gonna see some traction. But up next, we got Interplanar Bacon, right here. It's a land. Whenever you cast a Planeswalker spell, you gain a life, and you can tap it for a colorless, or you can pay 1 and tap it to add 2 mana of different colors to your mana pool. I always add to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast Planeswalker spells. Super Friends, right? It sound like a broken record today. There's probably like 3 other cards I'm going to say Super Friends about. But like, yeah, it's obvious, right? You play this in Super Friends. And the thing about this card is, I will say there is some tension to putting this in your mana base. You know, I feel like EDH decks can probably fit this a lot easier than a standard deck. But that doesn't mean standard decks don't want to play it, you know? I mean, as long as you're playing a lot of Planeswalkers in your Super Friends deck, this actually does produce colored mana, so you got that going for you. And if you don't want to play Planeswalkers, it at least still produces mana. But the whole idea of like gaining a life whenever you get a Planeswalker, and note that the land is not legendary. So you can get like 2 or 3 of this lady out in some games, and some you're just gaining a buttload of life, like every time you play any Planeswalker. But if you're trying to get the optimal use out of it, it's going to be... You gotta play a bunch of Planeswalkers, kid. So I'm not too sure how much play the card sees, but it's like guaranteed to see some play somewhere. But up next, we got Vraska's Finisher off the top rope, the old elbow drop. It's 2 and a black for a 3/2 Gorgon Assassin. And when Finisher enters the battlefield, destroy target creature or Planeswalker an opponent controls. Those dealt damage this turn. So what we have here is a very good draft common. Like, really, really good. You know, I was hoping that we'd see a bunch of like sort of Planeswalker hate today mixed in with these Planeswalkers. And I won't say they didn't disappoint, but you know, at least we got this. It's going to be really important for the limited environment, you know. It sucks that you have to have already dealt damage to the creature or the Planeswalker, so this is always going to come down, for the most part, second main phase, if you got combat damage in on a creature or a Planeswalker. So there's some stipulations here, some hoops that you have to jump through. But a 3 mana 3/2 is at least fine, especially at the common rarity in limited. Seems like a bread and butter card for that format. Real quick here, we saw Johnny's Pride Mate. We actually already knew this card was in the set. And I can't decide whether this art is cool or not. But anyway, let's move on here to Emergence Zone. Get in the zone. Emergence Zone. Here's a land. You tap it to add a colorless to your mana pool, or you can pay 1 and tap it and sacrifice it to be able to cast spells this turn as though they had flash. This one I want to really like too, you know, but there's tension with this card as well, you know, like an Esper deck, for instance. It already can't find room for, like, Field of Ruin anymore. It can't find room for, you know, Arch of Vraska in most cases, so I really don't think that an Esper control deck, which is the deck that's most likely going to want this, just control period, is going to actually play it. You know, I just think there's just too much need for colored sources, especially when you're playing like Kaya's Wrath. You have to hit it on turn 4. Plus, you're playing like Absorb in the deck. You have to hit that on turn 3, and just your sources are a mess in that deck. So, you know, I'm not sure that it finds room for something like this, but I still think the card is really cool and could obviously have multiple applications in Standard. And I like that it's, you know, just spells, period. Like, it's not just, you can cast creatures or planeswalkers at instant speed. You can cast anything. You can cast sorceries at instant speed. So there's a little bit more, I guess, play on this card, but the fact that it just produces colorless mana is gonna hurt a little bit its chances at playability, but that's obviously really cool looking sacrifice ability right there, so I'm obviously not putting it past this card to be in a deck or two. But up next, we got the old Flux Capacitor right here. Flux Channeler is 3 mana, 2 and a blue for a 2/2 human wizard, good creature type. And whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you proliferate. In case you're not familiar with this, choose any number of permanents and/or players, then give each another counter of each kind already there. We said they weren't going to do this, like, just on Twitter, like, yesterday. I saw somebody like, hey, you think they're going to do proliferate? And there's so many people who are like, no, they won't do proliferate. Come on, man. They're not going to do that. Here it is. Just don't think Wizards isn't too crazy to do a thing. You know, I doubt we'll see proliferate on too many cards. Although I could eat those words. Proliferate might be a very important ability in the set for all I know. But, man, if they go deep on proliferate with a set with 37 Planeswalkers, are you serious? I'm serious. This really gets the old brewer juices flowing, so we'll see what we can put together with this, because proliferate is always just like an insanely nasty ability to have at your disposal. Up next, another 3 mana blue card. Here's No Escape. It's 3 mana, 2 and a blue. I already said that. For an instant. Counter target creature or planeswalker spell. If that spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. You thought that was it? Actually, you still get to scry 1 after all that. I love the flavor text on this, you know. During the panel, they were like, do you guys think that, like, this is a trap? What Bolas is doing? You think it's maybe a little bit of a trap? You know, Magic players been speculating this is a trap. It's like, obviously, were we not supposed to know this was a trap immediately? Right? Like, I didn't get the, you know, the sort of suspense to it. You know, it's obviously it's a freaking trap. Are you serious? It's a trap. It's a trap. I had to do it. I'm sorry. But I didn't like this card when I first saw it on the panel, but it's growing on me just a little bit. I still feel like blue decks are, you know, they're playing either Sinister Sabotage, very often Absorb instead at this point. Plus, like, Negate and Disdainful Stroke in the sideboard, sometimes you see Syncopate, you know, Negate often in the main deck. It's just, we're running a lot of counter spells, you know? And I'm not sure that they're going to fit this 3 mana worse than cancel thing, you know. Technically, it's better than cancel. It's way more castable, so it's splashable. That's especially good in 3-color decks, you know. And there's plenty of creatures in the format to have to worry about it, you know, 4 and 5 mana, not to mention planeswalkers, especially once we get into this brave new meta with 1 billion planeswalkers in it. This is probably going to be a pretty desirable spell for 3 mana because it counters a lot of stuff higher on the curve than it. But the problem is, how many of these do you actually play? You know, it's not entirely dead in the Esper mirror, you know, you get to counter Kayas and Teferis and stuff like that. So it's good that it's not entirely dead in that matchup. But again, if you're already packing 4 Absorb, do you really have room for more 3 mana counter spells? I'm not totally sure, but the fact that this will exile Rekindling Phoenix and counter most playable planeswalkers, you know, higher up on the curve than it, and scry, like, oh, there's a lot of value packed onto one card, so I'm looking at it real hard, but I've got some doubts. But up next, let's look at Ravnica at War. This is 4 mana, 3 and a white, exile all multicolored permanents. This card's a sorcery, by the way. Oh no, not the Heart of Ravnica. I didn't know that was a thing. The Heart of Ravnica. Anyway. Card's fine, but probably not great. I'm sorry. I know it sounds like I'm crapping on all these cards. I actually am excited for a lot of these. And, you know, I've given some of these a pass. Like, oh, you'll probably see play. I don't know how much. You'll probably see play. And I kind of feel the same way about this. Like, this might be sideboardable at best. Yeah. Like, we've already got Kaya's Wrath and Ritual of Soot and Cry of the Carnarium and Deafening Clarion. Like, there's just... In terms of sweepers, we've got a lot of action already. And even though this one is way more castable, you know, it's more splashable, it only costs the one color of mana. Can you imagine that after playing with Kai's Wrath for a few months now? It only costs you one color of mana, but I still think this is going to whiff like 9% of the time, so it's probably going to be a really important sideboard card, you know? We're in a format that's kind of based around, like, there's 2 sets in it that are based around guilds. Plus, this set obviously has a fair number of you know, multicolored cards in it, just in the Planeswalker base alone. So, yeah, depending on what kind of decks we see, this is probably a really good sideboard card. And, like, just in case Hero of Precinct 1 becomes a real deck, this shuts down everything except for Hero, which is a little bit problematic, right? But you'll probably still be glad to have it. So, there's plenty of decks in this format right now that are multicolored, but I still have doubts, you know, like some of the best decks in the format are like mono blue tempo, mono red aggro, mono white aggro, and then Esper Control, which, like, this might be able to nab a Teferi or a Kaya from occasionally, but it's still not great in that matchup, you know? I do like the Exile clause on it, but for the most part, I just think there's probably way better sweepers, even against the decks that this is meant to do something about. Oh, but oh boy, let's go ahead and look at a brand new ability right here. This is Herald of the Dreadhorde. What a name. 4 mana, 3 and a black for 3/2 zombie warrior. And when it dies, you amass 2. That is, put 2 +1/+1 counters on an army you control. If you don't control an army, create a 0/0 black army creature token first. Oh my god, it's the Eternalized guys from Mom and Cat. Holy crap. This ability is good. I'll go out on a limb here and say, but this is fine. Again, this is kind of a bread and butter card for limited, and I'm not going to see like any standard play. Obviously, it's not powered for that, but really good example of a playable Amass card for limited decks. You know, it basically gives you 2 bodies. It's like a form of Afterlife, which I think is really, really cool. And then obviously if you get like another copy of this and you've gotten your army out, and then, you know, your second copy dies, well, your army gets a little bit bigger. So, like, all of that is fine value, you know? I think a lot of people were not necessarily turned off by this ability when they first saw it, but they were kind of like, I don't know how good that is. And I actually think it's quite good. You know, it just replaces itself when it dies, and that's more than fine. You know, I doubt Aristocrats decks are going to be clawing down the door to play the thing or anything, but again, in limited, it's fine. You know, replaces itself. Again, I like to look at this kind of like Afterlife, at least in this particular instance of the mechanic. And when you look at it like Afterlife, just it replaces itself when it dies. That's great. So it's a fine creature. Now here's another example of Amass, and this one I actually think I like more than a lot of people. This is Invade the City. 3 mana, 1 a blue and a red for sorcery. Amass X, where X is the number of instants and sorcery cards in your graveyard. Okay, so here's the thing. I think this card's probably good, but not like good enough to be like a fixture. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think the card is really, I don't know if it's going to see like any standard play whatsoever. But there are some implications here that I really, really like. You know, you can play a 100% creatureless deck where this is effectively your win condition. And it's like, in some ways, better than Crackling Drake, or at the very least better than Enigma Drake in a lot of situations, you know. If anybody who's played Blue-Red Drakes, which is one of my favorite decks in Standard, in case you didn't know that, you'll know that you occasionally will just get like 14 power Drakes, you know. So this goes pretty well with that, while also powering up your Drakes at the same time, so that's pretty cool too, you know. I just really like what this card's trying to do, and you don't play like 4 copies of it because it's not good until you've already amassed like a ton of cards, you know, instants and sorceries in your graveyard. But once you do that, the card just makes like 8/8. Seems good to me, is all I'm saying. Let's check out Widespread Brutality. That's a name for a card right there. It's 4 mana, 1 black, 2 red for sorcery. Amass 2, more of that. Then the army you amassed deals damage equal to its power to each non-army creature. Okay, so at first I was a little bit off on this card, and I still think that I'm wary of it. But I also am starting to think that it might actually be like insanely good, you know. That's maybe not, especially considering a Rakdos deck doesn't necessarily want like a pseudo sweeper like this, or at least not the Rakdos aggro deck. The Rakdos mid-range deck, on the other end, very well might, you know. But for 4 mana, you're not actually really sweeping the board here. You're just doing 2 to everything. So you get like a Fiery Cannonade that, or a Pyroclasm, whatever, you know, that gets a body stapled to it, which isn't bad, you know. It's not necessarily a one-sided sweeper, but you get a creature, and then you hit everything for at least 2 damage. which will probably take a couple of early creatures off the board and might even be important against, mono blue and mono white and mono red. You just really clean up the early game with this while also advancing your board state. So it's very likely, in some matchups at least, that you can spin this into like a 3-for-1 fairly easily. So I'm actually kind of interested in this. And I also like the idea that if you already have an army out, you amass 2, you put 2 counters on an army you already control, and it's possible that you do like 3 to 5 damage to the whole board except for your big army guy. So maybe has a real chance here. Again, I'm a little bit wary of it because I'm just not sure exactly where it fits, but it does provide you a win condition and a pseudo sweeper all in the same card, and you really got to pay attention to that. Here's Tibalt's Ranger. This is 2 mana, 1 and a red for a 1/2 devil. Always love when we see devils. When Tibalt's Ranger dies, it deals 1 damage to any target, and you can pay 1 and a red to have it get +2/+0 until end of turn. This is yet another card that I really want to like. We've got Spectacle in the format right now, and the fire breathing ability on it is not like bad. Like, it's not insignificant, especially in the late game. These red decks kind of need a good mana sink like this, like other than Skargan Hellkite, which a lot of the mono red decks don't play. It's just like the Gruul Warriors decks play those. So this actually could be a decent, like, I guess, non-CJing commander. Mana sink for the deck for a relatively low price, but the problem is there's just like a million cards you'd rather play, especially in the 2-drop slot. Vaishina Pyromancer immediately comes to mind, but there's still like other creatures that are, Runaway Steamkin, for instance. It's probably just higher in overall power level than a card like this, even with Spectacle in the format. So again, I see this as more of an important limited card than anything else, but that said, very likely an extremely important limited card. This seems like one of the better 2-drops that could be in the set for that format specifically. But here's a card right here, you guys. There's Bolas' Citadel, 6 mana, 3 and 3 black for a legendary artifact. You may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play the top card of your library. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost. And there's more. You can tap it, sacrifice 10 non-land permanents. Each opponent loses 10 life. So this seems like a commander card to me, right? Like, right? Does it cost too much for commander, and is 10 life not enough to do anything in commander? As far as standard goes, you guys, I think 6 mana is like, it's a lot. That's so much. It is so much. And like, after you actually get to your 6-drop, like, how much life are you going to have to spend? Just playing free things. So I'm not too sure. One thing I do, I guess, like about this is that it's actually sacrificed 9 permanents, 9 non-land permanents. You can just always sacrifice this. You don't need it anymore. But that's still a lot. That's still 9 non-land permanents is a lot. And I guess part of the idea is that you've been casting free spells, so it's more likely that you'll get a bunch of permanents out. But that's a tough road to hoe, man. Like, the idea that you'll be able to actually get to this, it's very, not only expensive, but hard to cast 6-drop card, and still have enough life left over to cast a bunch of free spells, and then actually have 9 other permanents to tap and sacrifice. At least. It's just a lot of hoops, man. So many hoops to jump through. And I very, highly doubt that we're seeing the next, like, Necropotence. Very likely we're not seeing, like, even Yawgmoth's Bargain, for that matter, So I want to really like this card in Standard, and it does get my sort of, it gets my brain going. Like, I want to brew around the card, but I have my doubts. God, it sounds like I'm crapping all over all these cards. This is a really cool card. I'm not going to deny that, but we'll have to wait and see how much relevance this has in Standard. This strikes me as the kind of card that it's either going to be like extremely relevant in Standard, which I kind of doubt, honestly. I mean, there are control decks in this format. I don't know that I see it, but it's either going to be extremely dominant or not, like, at all. No one will care. So we'll see which one of those it is, but I'm kind of leaning towards this is actually not a good card. It's a crazy EDH card. But even in that capacity, it looks really fun to play. Now, don't worry. We're getting to the Planeswalkers, guys. I know you're probably getting antsy at this point, but I got to show you possibly the best card previewed all day, and that's Dreadhorde Invasion, or Better Blossom, people are calling it. I would not go that far. Let's calm down. I don't know about that. But anyway, it's 1 and a black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life, and you amass 1. Then, whenever a zombie token you control with power 6 or greater attacks, it gains lifelink until end of turn. Okay, so this goes in the zombie deck, you know, the 4-mana Liliana from, like, Corset, I think it was. Yeah, it goes in that deck because it's got zombie synergy, but is this a standard playable, like, not only a standard playable card, but like an all-star? Maybe I'll stop short of all-star, but it is definitely a standard playable card, likely. You know, I've died to my own Bitter Blossom a few times. I played Blue-Black Fairies way back in Lorwyn block, which is one of my favorite blocks of all time. So I have played many a Bitter Blossom in my day, and this is no Bitter Blossom. You know, it doesn't create flying creatures. There's absolutely no evasion on the creatures that this creates, which I don't like. And it actually doesn't create multiple creatures. You know, if you were able to amass, you know, a 1/1 or whatever, you know, on one turn, then if that creature survives until the next turn, well, then you don't get another creature. You get a counter on the creature that already existed, and that is not as good. It's just not. As filling your board with 1/1 flyers, it's just not. You know, it doesn't really allow you to go wide in any way. It allows you to go tall, but I'm not sure how good that is over the course of like 6 turns, and you're losing life the whole time. So, especially in a format with controls like Mortify, you know, Vivian Reed, I'm just not sure how important this card is. That said, though, you resolve a copy against Esper Control and they don't have the Mortify immediately, it's going to cause like real problems. So I can see this being a great card. Bitter Blossom was a great card, but again, my contention is that this ain't Bitter Blossom. You know, people have been calling it Better Blossom. I don't know about that. Do not know about that. I can't believe it's not Butter Blossom. That's what I'm calling this right now, because like I got hang-ups. I got hang-ups, you guys. It's not Bitter Blossom. I don't think it's in the same league as Bitter Blossom. It's obviously supposed to evoke Bitter Blossom. Yeah, that's a joke if you know anything about Lorwyn block. But anyway, it's meant to evoke thoughts of Bitter Blossom, but I ain't ready to call it that yet. Is it a good card? Yes. But all right, guys, time is here. Are you ready for some walkers? We got 4 of them today, including our Buy a Box promo. Tezzeret, Master of the Bridge. It's 6 mana, 4, a blue, and a black. And here's the thing, right? 5 loyalty, and every Planeswalker in the set, apparently, has some sort of, you know, triggered or otherwise just an ability, other than their loyalty abilities. And we see that here on Tezzy. Creature and Planeswalker spells you cast have affinity for artifacts. What? You can also +2 it to have Tezzy deal X damage to each opponent, where X is the number of artifacts you control, and then you gain X life. You can also -3 him to return target artifact from your graveyard to your hand, or ultimate is -8. Exile the top 10 cards of your library, put all artifacts from among them, just slap onto the battlefield. What have they done? This, actually, I won't go that far. I'm not really freaked out. I've seen some people freaked out already on Twitter, like, man, this card's too good for Buy a Box promo. I don't think so. It doesn't protect itself in any meaningful way. Note that it only hits players for damage. You know, it doesn't actually hit creatures. So it's a relatively expensive walker at 6 mana, and not being able to protect itself in any meaningful way is a huge downside. That said, just on the other hand, playing Devil's Advocate, it do things. You know, like an all artifact deck or a very nearly all artifact deck is a fine card. You know, but even the sparse artifact decks that sort of exist in this format usually don't play the 5 mana Tezzeret, which is like objectively better. So I am not sure that this is the right card. Although again, EDH, you know, this might strike the right balance between like EDH playable, so you only have to get like 1 copy of it if you want it. Like, oh, my shirt, buddy. If you're gonna get restless, I gotta let you go. But in any case, you know, if you're playing EDH, you only need the 1 copy, so it's not gonna like destroy anybody's wallet. I hope not. Please don't go up to $80. Don't do that. There's no reason for you to do that. But here's Vraska, Swarm's Eminence. This is an uncommon Planeswalker. They made Vraska uncommon. I'm still not sure how I'm grappling with that. But anyway, 4 mana, 2, and then 2 hybrid black and green mana. I love seeing hybrid mana in every set. Do it. Keep doing this. Don't just do it for Ravnica. I know you will. do it for the Ravnica set, and that's it. But hybrid mana is amazing. It should just be a thing all the time. But anyway, rant over. Legendary Planeswalker Vraska. Whenever a creature you control with Death Touch deals damage to a player or Planeswalker, put a +1/+1 counter on said creature, and you get -2, old Vraska bud here, to create a 1/1 Black Assassin creature token with Death Touch, and whenever this creature deals combat or deals damage to a Planeswalker, destroy said Planeswalker. This is a bad card, I think. You know, this static ability on it is fine, I guess. You know, you got Death Touch dudes in your deck other than the Death Touch dudes that she's making. I think maybe, but like, look at the spread of options in Golgari right now. You know, I just don't think that unless something like really beneficial to this card comes along, that it's going to see a ton of play. You know, we might see a sort of a kitsy, you know, Death Touch deck. You could, you know, build that really fast, I would say, and relatively cheap for that matter. And you play some good stuff like a Sareth, you know. There's some good Death Touch dudes in this format to build a deck around, don't get me wrong. But even then, I'm not totally sure that that's good enough. You know, so I'm really not liking this Vraska. Vraska's one of my favorite walkers. I was really hoping they'd do it justice. And even though this is cool isn't exactly like high level of standard playable, which is what I really wanted out of this Vraska. But I guess we have 1.5 standard playable Vraskas in standard right now already, so maybe they didn't want to add another one. You know, Golgari Queen is somewhat playable, and then like Relic Seeker is good enough. Like that has seen in plenty of play in the past, at least. So this will likely be the worst Vraska in standard, but it's still cool. I'm just not sure how I feel about it as a whole. But up next, here's the Catman, you guys. I should be excited about this one. It's 4 mana, 2 a green and a white for a 5 loyalty Planeswalker, and creatures you control, sir or madam, have Vigilance. And you can +1 old Johnny Pants to gain 3 life, or you can -2 Johnny Pants to put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control and a loyalty counter on each other Planeswalker you control. Okay, so I'm starting to come around on this Ajani. I am. Didn't like it at first. I was just, oh, come on, you're screwing up my favorite Planeswalkers, Wizards. But actually, even though I'm not super sure this has a place in Standard, I still think that this is maybe one of the more testable Planeswalkers. Not detestable, but testable Planeswalkers that we saw on the day, you know? A green-white tokens deck, or really any green-white deck, is going to have a fair amount of creatures out by the time this hits the table. And you can -2 it a couple of times. So you can make your whole team bigger right quick. I mean, 4 mana actually isn't that much for a Planeswalker, especially one that starts at a relatively high loyalty like this. And getting 2 -2 activations on it is nice. It's very good. But I actually don't mind the plus ability either. I know that gain 3 life isn't protecting itself. As a matter of fact, this is another Planeswalker that doesn't meaningfully protect itself in any real way. And that always bugs the crap out of me. And it doesn't really provide any kind of card advantage. Just traditionally, the way we evaluate Planeswalkers is a disappointing Planeswalker. But in a set with 37 Planeswalkers, obviously we have to get outside the box of Planeswalker design just a little bit. And I think they're doing that well. You know, all your creatures having Vigilance and the ability to make all your creatures bigger while they have Vigilance is actually really, really good when you think about it. You know, your creatures get bigger from his -2, and they can swing in if they want to, but you still leave them up to block. So that just leaves you really, that leaves you in a very good situation. When you're in these sort of aggro or even mid-rangey kind of mirrors, this gives you a huge edge. And if you're up against like a hardline aggro deck that goes a little bit faster than you, being able to gain, 3/6 life is going to be really impactful to get you to the point of the game where you need to be. So I'm excited to try out this Ajani, and I'm not as sour on it as I was when I first saw it, but I'm still not sure, and it's going to have to prove itself to me. I say that with a bunch of cards every spoiler season, but I really effing mean it with this one, you guys. I can't wait to get in the lab with it, because I want to know if it's good enough, but I do, again, I've got my doubts. But check out my favorite walker of the day, you guys. Liliana, Dreadhorde General. The General is 6 mana, 4 and 2 black for a 6 loyalty Planeswalker. That's a lot of loyalty. And yeah, it's a lot of casting cost too. But it's a lot of loyalty, buddy. It's obviously it's a legendary Planeswalker, Liliana. And whenever a creature you control dies, draw a card. It's very good. You can +1 Lily to create a 2/2 black Zombo creature token. And you can -4 Lily to have each player sacrifice 2 creatures. That's pretty good. And you can -9 Lily to have each opponent choose a permanent they control of each permanent type, and then sacrifice the rest. So they actually just previewed cards on the stream that's behind me. You actually, depending on, you might be able to hear it slightly in the background. I'm not sure. But they just previewed cards on there, so I'm going to try to get those in before the video's over. But anyway, finishing up here on Liliana. I don't like the ultimate, but who cares? You know, don't really evaluate Planeswalkers by their ultimate. It looks really dope, but they still get to keep their best thing. So sometimes it's going to be like actively not good enough at all. You know? Sometimes only have like one decent permanent. You know, I don't know. Yeah, they sack all their lands, so that's probably good. You know, this is a game-winning ultimate, but obviously the least important thing on the card is the ultimate, which is the case with most Planeswalkers. In this case, you get not only two pretty decent, you know, a plus ability and a minus ability, but jeezy crazy, you guys. That line of text there before you even get to any of the loyalty abilities is bananas. That's whenever something dies, draw a card. So you get a Midnight Reaper, but you don't pay life, you know? Like, you don't have to take a ping every time something dies and you draw a card. So, 6 mana is my only hang-up. My only hang-up on this card is the fact that it costs so freaking much. But when you do actually get it to hit the table, then you could have as much as a 7 loyalty Planeswalker. On that turn, that's really good. Even though it's 6 mana, 7 loyalty is so much, and it's hard for your opponent to break through. There has to be a mid-range deck that'll fit it, and I do think that's actually a taller order than it seems like. You know, this doesn't immediately slot into much of anything, except for maybe Esper Control. They could be excited about a card like this. But maybe not, you know? They don't necessarily even need the win condition. You know, why pack your deck with another 6 mana sorcery speed card? So that's probably not a correct assessment. So you very likely have to find a deck to put this in, but the card is just so powerful in a vacuum that I don't mind paying 6 mana for it. And again, that first line of text before you even get to any of the loyalty abilities, worth its weight in gold by itself. This is worth 6 mana. Here's Tibalt, guys. 2 in a red for Legendary Planeswalker Tibalt with 5 loyalty. Your opponents can't gain life. Fine. And you can -2 it to create a 1/1 red devil creature token with, when this creature dies, it deals 1 damage to any target. Okay, so this is probably playable. The first time I read this card was 30 seconds ago, but so this is a fresh assessment, literally a hot take. Keep that in mind. But I think this might be one of the better Planeswalkers that we saw all day, which isn't necessarily a high bar. It's kind of a backhanded compliment, you know, but it's probably good. Splashable. 3 mana is obviously quite low for a Planeswalker. And it's really easy to cast. But I actually think that the opponents can't gain life clause is going to be like a little bit more important than it looks at first glance. You know, there's some number of lifelink creatures, including Legion's Landing and Adanto tokens and stuff, in mono white decks. So this fights those pretty well. But I think kind of most notably, it's going to help fight Absorb for red decks. Now, I'm not sure this is enough value on turn 3. You know, like you'll probably rather have Chain Whirler or something on turn 3 in a lot of decks. But still, keeping them off of gaining life, probably important, you know. For all we know, there's like a Sphinx's Revelation type spell in this set, you know, gain you a bunch of life and do something great at the same time. So this could be a safeguard for something that we haven't seen yet. Although you could say that about literally any card. I just think the line players can't gain life could easily be the safeguard against a pretty important card that's hiding in the set somewhere. But this already kind of does stuff, you know, just keeping your opponent off of Absorb and creating 2 bodies worth of value is probably very, very good against Esper. So I like a lot about this card. Whoop, 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 we got more. We got more, you guys. It's going to be like a 45-minute video. Here's Obnixilis the Hate Twisted. This is 5 mana, and I'm reading this for the first time as I read it out loud here. This is 3 and 2 black for 5 loyalty Planeswalker. Whenever an opponent draws a card, Obnix the Hate Twisted deals 1 damage to that player. And you can -2 it and destroy target creature. Its controller draws 2 cards. So, first impressions, it's probably bad. It deals at least 1 damage to an opponent for every card, you know, for every turn that they take. But hey, you know, if they want to play Chemist's Insights and Ops and Charter Courses and stuff like that, well, they're taking a bunch of damage. So, you know, I can see this actually being somewhat playable, but I really doubt it, especially at that mana cost. I just feel like there's probably better options for decks that want to run this. But at the same time, if you're building mono black, this is probably a desirable 5-drop. I'd like to at least try this in testing over something like, say, Doom Whisperer at a similar mana cost and see what the pros and cons are. Oh, but this one might be pretty decent. Here's Obnixilus's Cruelty right here. That's hard to say. It's ONC. I'll just call it ONC. It's 3 mana, 2 and a black for an instant. That's an important card type. Target creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn. If that creature would die this turn, you exile the sucker instead. Well, god dang, that seems pretty good right there, you know. I feel like this has a huge edge over something like, say, Murder, you know, which really doesn't see, like, hardly any play. And it does compete with Mortify, so you got to worry about that, too. At least in Esper control, but this is a more than serviceable removal spell, obviously. Kills indestructible guys in case that's going to be a real problem, you know. At the very least, it'll kill, like, a Danto Vanguard and stuff. But if there's a problem indestructible creature in this format, or in this set, then this immediately becomes a very playable card, especially given how castable it is, you know. It's easier to cast than Mortify or Murder for what that analysis is worth. And exiling is very important. Like, this is obviously way better than Murder or Mortify against, say, Rekindling Phoenix, which is a very important consideration in this format. So the exile clause is probably going to be one of the best things about the card. And again, if there's an indestructible guy, this card just gets ridiculous. Holy crap, there's like one more card, you guys, or at least at time of recording, there's one more card, and it's Time Wipe. This is 5 mana, 2 white and a blue for a sorcery. Return a creature you control to its owner's hand. Then destroy all the creatures. How, like, condescending and pretentious does Teferi sound in this flavor text? It takes years of study to comprehend. Get off your high horse, Teferi. But in any case, card looks good, right? You know, it's a wrath effect. Allows you to save one of your creatures, repeat it into the battlefield trigger. Frank Carson has actually already tweeted out that you can just use, like, I think it's Salvager's Secrets, and loop this just infinitely. So it seems good, you know. There's a lot of other fun stuff you can do with this, but it is a sweeper that doesn't necessarily require you to play creatures. It just really would like it if you played some creatures to get the full value out of it, you know. But I imagine this is going to get cast a lot with no creatures in play, you know, especially once Cleansing Nova rotates. If the decks still need a 5-mana sweeper, this is probably going to be one of the go-tos, you know. Also, by the way, you know, you could do fun stuff like, say, pop a Frilled Mystic back to your hand, so you got a backup counterspell after your Wrath. Like, there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do with this. Enter the battlefield triggers you can abuse. So it's not every day that you see, you know, a deck that wants both a sweeper and plays a bunch of creatures. But usually decks are one or the other. You know, you want a sweeper because you're in control and you're trying to beat aggro, or you want creatures because you're trying to beat control. But this card kind of sandwiches them both together, and there's probably a ton of abusable things that you can do with this. I'm super excited to really take a deep dive into this card, but as it is right now, it's a serviceable 5-mana sweeper that can also lead to some probably disgustingly busted plays later on. I guess my only complaint with this card is that it doesn't have anything to do with taking extra turns. You know, I'm sort of like conditioned at this point to see time and blue mana on a card and be like, oh, we taking some turns, boys. But no, we're not doing that. But what we are is doing is sweeping the board, and that's also pretty good, I hear. All right, guys, no rest for the wicked. They just keep previewing cards, and the cards that they've just previewed are quite good, actually. Here's Paradise Druid right here. I'm psyched for this. It's just 2 mana, 1 and a green for a 2/1 elf druid. Has hexproof as long as it's untapped. And you can tap it to add a mana of just any old color. That's so good. You know? I would show my face to talk about these next 2 cards, but they previewed them in the middle of editing. So I was able to just hop back on the microphone here and talk about them. So yeah, Paradise Druid is good. Like, how much more do I really have to say about this? It's got the 1 toughness, so I guess you kind of have to worry about Goblin Chain Whirler at all, you know, like Fanatical Firebrand. There's definitely things you might have to worry about, but this is a pretty premium looking mana druid to me, or mana dork, period. You know, it's kind of like a Sylvan Caryatid, except for, you know, it's not a 0/3. It's a little bit heftier. You know, you can actually attack with this if you absolutely have to, but if you need to leave it untapped until you absolutely need it, you can do that relatively consequence-free because of the hexproof. So this is, as they say in the business, a dope card, and will very likely see some dang old play. But let's check out Jace, everybody. Had to happen eventually, right? Jace, Wielder of Mysteries. Here he is, guys. So let's see what he does. 4 mana, 1 and 3 blue for a 4 loyalty Planeswalker. If you would draw a card While your library has no cards in it, Laboratory Maniac. You win the game instead. That's... Okay, we'll talk about that. +1, target player puts top 2 cards of the library into their graveyard. Draw a card. Also, -8 to draw 7 cards. And then, if your library has no cards in it, you win the game. So it's a little redundant there with that first ability, whatever. But this is the milled Planeswalker that I wanted in my in the cards I want video. I actually don't think that this is very good. There, I said it. I don't know why it took me so long to get the phrase out, but again, this doesn't really, help itself in any way. It doesn't protect itself. It does generate card advantage, so I'll say that much. You can draw a card with it every turn by plussing it, which is probably good enough in and of itself. And if the card sees play, it's because it just plusses to draw a card. And mill decks will, I think, want this card, if only because it has a mill ability on it, but I'm not actually sure about that, to be honest with you. If anything, there is a deck that plays, all the Narcomoebas and the Creeping Chills, plays Surveil cards and stuff like that, and it might have a chance at running itself out of cards, in which case you can just win off of Jace, but that is the dream, and we will try to keep that dream alive and actually make it come true at some point this season, because I'm excited about some of the kind of jankier looking stuff you can do with this Planeswalker, but just off the top of my head here, I'm going to go ahead and say this probably isn't a major standard player. I think that's it. I'm pretty sure that for now, at least, that is all. So, if they preview some more, I'm going to try to get back on the mic with you a little bit later and, clean those up for you. But, geez, guys, that was a lot of cards. That was a lot of cards to talk about right there. I know we're probably 40 minutes in here, and I hope you're still with me. If you are, you're probably already subscribed to the channel. But just in case you're not, and you're new around these parts, you've never seen my fat mug before, whatever, then make sure you subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, because this is only the beginning. Only the beginning, kids. There's going to be spoilers for the next 3 weeks straight, plus my exclusive preview coming up pretty soon here. So make sure you subscribe for all that content. Hit the like button. I was going to say hit the bell. Do hit the bell for the notification thing. But also, smash that like button. I can't believe I just said that. Please thumbs up the video. That would be nice. A lot of work went into this one. No sleep. I'm obviously delirious. Longtime fans of the channel will notice how different my demeanor is for this video. I'm kind of got a lot of energy for this one. I was so jacked for these cards, but now it's over. But it's going to start again tomorrow, or maybe even later on tonight, so make sure you're subbed to the channel. And if you really want to help out, I know I'm supposed to give this pitch. You're probably already tuned out. You may have clicked away from the videos. There's more stuff to talk about. I know. You don't want to hear this part, but if you want to help keep the channel alive, donate to the Patreon. All I ask is $1 a month. Leave a link in the description for you down there. I'll let you vote on what decks you want to see in the upcoming season. I'll let you know what lists and other videos are coming up 24 hours in advance. So try to give you as much value as I can for $1, and the channel literally couldn't exist without the Patreon, because AdSense dollars have been freaking terrible lately. The last 2 months, AdSense has been basically no money, so it sucks. So if you can, help out, go over to the Patreon, pledge $1, and it will make a huge difference to me and the channel. So do that. But aside from that, I think I'm done with the rants. I'm fairly sure I'm done with the wrench and the blue cheese. I'll never be done with the blue cheese, but in any case, I think that's it. I'm pretty sure that's it. Ramblings of a madman over. Catch you guys later. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.